Hey guys. So today we're going to do function basics. So here I have written out some tasks. First, I want to get a function that prints a random element for a list. Guess what I'm going to need for that? I'm going to need the random library. So up at the top of my program, I'm going to do from random import. Thank you for your help, Indy. Uh, by the way, this is Indy. Hi, Indy. Okay, so from the random library, I'm going to import the choice function. Okay, and then I've already declared my dialog options, which I roughly got from like Baldur's Gate or something. They're just some kind of garbage fantasy dialogue. So the first thing I want to do is make a function. And the way I make a function is I say that I'm going to define a function. So I write def, and again, this is another word that you can't use as a variable name now. Not that you would have to begin with. So I'm going to say define, right? So def get dialog is what I'm going to call this function. You can call the function basically anything you want, not quite, but close. And then I'm going to put my colon there, and then I'm going to indent this dialog options because I'm not going to need that anywhere else in my program, and so that's going to be a part of the function. So indenting that made it inside the function, which means that you won't be able to get at it otherwise. If you need to get at it otherwise, we'll do some scoping stuff here in the future. But for right now, I'm just going to make it a part of the function. And then I'm going to say print, and then all I'm doing is printing. Remember, I'm not getting this back. I'm just going to call this function up, and and then it's going to do this printing part. So I'm going to print get dialog, oops, not get dialog, dialog options, and I'm going to do choice to that. Okay, so what that's going to do is that's going to go get the choice function out of the random library, which I collected, right? So it's going to enact the choice function on this list. And now if I hit run here, oops, my little guy's in the way, I get no output at all. And that's because this function's not actually getting called at all, right? So I have this thing that's defining a function, but I'm not actually doing the function anymore. So I'm going to put that here. So I'm going to call the getDialog function. And the way you call a function is you just write its name and then parentheses. And what that's going to do is that's going to go ahead and call that function. And so I got zounds, whoops, cancel, what ho again, come at me, these kind of things. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Now, that's not getting me anything back. So I'm gonna do next sending something. So I'm gonna send some input into the function. And then thirdly, I'm gonna get some input back. So for right now, my next goal is to make a function that takes a number and just prints out double that number. And the way you do that is you get to define another function, right? So you write def, and I'm gonna call this one the doubler, right? You can name your function whatever the heck you want. And the way that function's going to work is it's going to print out, oh, I need twice a thing, right? So it's supposed to get something from the user or from another part of your program. And I'm going to call that thing x here. And now x is going to be whatever you put in the parentheses. And then what we're going to do is we're going to print out 2 times x. And now this is there's a little bit of a thing here. I've said that this thing takes a number and doubles it, but it can actually take anything that can be doubled and try to double it. Like whatever you give it, it's going to try to double it. And frankly, in Python, there are a lot of things you can double that aren't numbers. So yeah, we'll deal with the kind of validating input things a little further down the line. It's a little bit beyond the scope today. If you know how to do that, feel free to incorporate it. But for right now, I'm going to assume I don't know how to do that. Okay, so let's try calling that thing. So let's call the doubler on, say, 7. And then, again, the way we do that is we say doubler, right? And then parentheses. And then in the parentheses, go the number you want to call it on. So I want to call it on 7. And now that's going to print out 14. And you should notice, right, that the printout is this part. I'm not going to get to use 2x anywhere. Does that make sense? Like, that doubler, it doubles it, and then it prints that out, and then it's poof gone. And so that's one of the things about functions is if you do something in that function, most of the time it's poof gone unless you bring it back. And so that's going to be what my third thing is, which is going to tell me if a function's if a given number's even. So I'm going to define is even is going to be my function's name. And it's going to take a number. And I'm going to say that that's a number. And I'm going to name it number. Because you can, so what the heck. And then, oops. And then indented, right, to be in the function. Then, let me see. So, if it's even, let's see. Oh, I don't have conditionals yet. Well, you're going to get them. They're not hard. So, we should say if number mod 2 is 0, right? So if it's divisible by 2, then we'll return, and that's another keyword. Return is give back, right? So we're going to give back the value true, and otherwise, else, we'll return false. Now, Python functions don't have to return things. In some languages, they do. The function that you're writing does have to return something. In the special case of Python, it doesn't have to return anything. You'll get some weird stuff if you try to. Well, it always returns something. It's something called none, but don't sweat it for right now. Okay, so let me call my is even function. So I'm going to say print out the result of is even on 5. Oh, and actually, let me do a little bit. How to do this? Let me use a formatted string. Okay, so 5 is even, colon, oops, I missed a brace. So this is going to print out the string. 5 is even, right? That's all string part. And then the result of calling the is even function on 5. And then we're going to do that same thing with 8. And I'm making sure to change it both in the display part and in the pass part. If you just change it in the display part, it gets confusing. All right, so let's run that. Okay, so 5 is even, which is false, and 8 is even, which is true. Cool. So this thing just returns either true or false. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. There's a weirder way to make this function. If you've got a little computer coding experience, see if you can play Code Golf with this thing. You can probably get this down a bunch of characters. And just to throw in a couple comments here, maybe let me say, remember that mod 2 gives the remainder after division by 2, right? So if it's divisible by 2, then the remainder is 0. That means it's even, and otherwise it's false. Otherwise it's odd. Okay, and a more complicated example. So here's a more complicated example, which I'm just gonna snag. So this is mostly in here for cool sake. So this is a function called days in month, right? And it takes, so this is a function called days in month, and it takes, right, so what's it expecting to get when you call it? It takes two variables, a month, so a month, and a is leap year. So the fact that it's called is leap year makes me think that that's probably a Boolean. And the other one, if I look at this, is if I'm looking at this if statement here, it's checking is that month 2. So if that month is 2, then I think it's checking whether month is a number, right? So month is an integer, really probably a probably 1 to 12, and is leap year is a Boolean. And then if we look at this, oh, that's a weird one, right? So what we've got is if the month is 2, right? So if it's February, then we return 28, and 1 times is it a leap year? And is leap year is a Boolean that probably came from somewhere else, right? That's probably the result of calling an is leap year function on the year. And then otherwise, right, so if it's not February, then we'll return 31 minus the month minus 1 mod 7 mod 2. It turns out this works. Why? I don't know. Calendars are weird. But it does work. So then this last bit is just a double check that it works. So this print out all the months and the numbers of days in an F string. All right, so let's run that and see that it works. And notice we've got our little for loop, right? So we're looping for, and this is going to start at 0 and go to 11. And so we're doing I plus 1s in here, right? So month 1, January has 31 days, February has 28. Oh, because I passed false. See that? So I forced it to be not a leap year this year. Is it a leap year this year? It was a leap year this year. Shit. Odds are good that it's not a leap year when you're watching this. Unless the world ends. All right. So month 2, February had 29 days in it this year. Month 3 had 31. Month 4 had 30. Right. So you can go through and check your knuckles with this thing. All right. So those are my examples for function behaviors. Functions do get a little more complicated. Do be careful that if you declare a variable in the thing, you won't get to use it anywhere else. And if you change a variable in it, oftentimes it's only changed in the function. So there's this thing called scoping that we're going to have to deal with later. But for right now, just know that variables can act a little oddly in there.